since I promised everyone to record. Okay, it looks like recording has started. So my name is Chloe Hundal. As you all probably know, I've been your point person for this grant. So we basically wanted to have a meeting to bring you all together with the team. So I have here Kenesha Reynolds, who's our conservation or the director of our conservation programs team, and then Chessa, who is the manager for programs, I believe is her new title. She can correct me. I'll have them introduce themselves. Actually, let me pass it over to Kenesha to introduce herself.
Thanks, Chloe. Hey, everyone. I'm Kenesha Reynolds. As Chloe says, I'm the Director of Conservation Programs here with NACD. Together with my team, we oversee our federal grants and agreements, which include our perimeter fencing grant program. Thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today. We are really excited about this program and excited about the work and the outcome that we'll have from this program from all of you. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chessa Aspart. I am the program manager with NACD. I'm here to help Chloe with perimeter fencing when she needs assistance.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I only just had a couple talking points I wanted to go over, and then I really wanted it to be more of a discussion with you all. So kind of getting a better sense of where everyone is at, and then answering any questions that you have that you're waiting to get answers from us, or that you'd like to bring to the table for a discussion. So I will just begin by going over what our talking points are. So this is the only slide. I just wanted to have this available, just kind of like a guide post for us to see what I was planning to cover today. So this is our updates that I'd like to go over. As you probably know, quarterly reports were due today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about reporting and what the expectations are around reporting, since it was our first round of collecting reports. I know that we have not dispersed any payments yet, so I am aware of that. We are still waiting on NRCS to disperse the payment to us, and as soon as we get that, we will be sending out our first advance payments to you all, or perhaps at this point they may be reimbursement payments. So I understand that even though we have not sent out payments, there's a chance that some of you have already been working on these projects and may already have accrued expenses on this grant. And so that's perfectly okay. And that is also why I still wanted to collect reports for this quarter to get an idea of what activities have been accomplished, if there have been any activities accomplished, or just kind of understand where you're all at. So I did want to just briefly go over the report. And I need to just pull that up really quickly. Just so that I could just talk through what we're looking at, and just going to pull this out. Okay. All right, so everyone can see the report here. I just wanted to briefly go over this. I'm sure most of you have already seen this. If you've, yep.
We're seeing a web page, not the document. You might need to stop share. Okay, there we are.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I was trying to take it away from my own web page, but my bad. I should have exited those before I started. So here's the report. You might already be familiar with this if you've looked at it, because it is due today. So hopefully you are already familiar with it. But I just wanted to walk through it briefly and just see if you all had any questions about the report. Obviously, we just have the basic information up here and the period that you're reporting on. We do ask for a summary of your progress on your milestones, which are listed in your MOAs. So for those of you that have your MOAs executed, which is the majority of you, you'll have that in section C of your MOA. So we want to kind of get progress on each of those milestones that are listed out in your MOA. discussing your partners, getting into metrics. So how many feet of fencing, the number of producers you've reached, specifically how many historically underserved or the percentage of historically underserved, and then letting us know if there was any unexpected outcomes, and then talk a little bit about what you plan to do next quarter. Again, I understand that we're all at different stages right now with the project since we have not administered our first payments, but I still wanted to get a kind of check the pulse, I guess, of what's going on with our projects right now. So I still wanted to have these reports completed. And then I think the most important piece right now is to get an idea of expenditures. So, and I wanted to kind of talk through this briefly. These boxes, you would tell us about how much match that you had expended in the last quarter, the quarter that you're reporting on, the one this time, the one that ended in June. And then how much NACD funds that you expended. And that is broken up into those two categories of your budget, which is capacity building and financial assistance. So something to keep in mind while you're looking at this report is looking at the budget that you had approved in your MOA, as you're tracking your expenses. So you're tracking against that budget that you already have approved. And something else to note is that NACD funds expended doesn't necessarily mean that funds that we have paid out to you already. Part of that could potentially be reimbursement, if that makes sense. So if you, for example, were spending hours working on this grant in the last quarter, and you have charged hours to this grant in the last quarter, but because we have not because we have not dispersed funds for this grant, then you would still have say that you have expended NACD funds, just that you have not been dispersed those funds yet. So you want to be tracking your expenditures for this grant, even if you're using other funds that you will later reimburse with the NACD funds. Hopefully that makes sense. So we have this broken up, like I said, capacity building and financial assistance. And then when I asked this question, I think there was some confusion here. The NACD funds still on hand, unliquidated advance funds. I added this note that this only applies if you've received an advance from NACD and you still have leftover funds that you haven't spent yet from last quarter. So at this point, all of the report should say 0 because we have not dispersed any funds. So this is not the amount of your total budget that you haven't spent yet. It's the amount of funds that you have received from NACD that you're still holding on to. It's cash that you've received from us that you have not liquidated or that you have not spent on this grant yet. So this will help us to understand where you are at with your spending and where you expect to be for the next quarter. So the next question is to ask if you anticipate any changes in your cost projections. So another piece of your MOA includes that cost projection worksheet. And that is something that you want to also be tracking for your actual expenditures and letting me know when you are changing those cost projections. So looking at the cost projections, and then if you realize these cost projections need to change, then you can reach out to me at any time. It doesn't have to be when these reports are due. These quarterly reports are kind of like a check-in point where you can say, are my cost projections still accurate? And that's the question. Do you anticipate changes for your cost projections? If you do, it's going to have you provide a brief explanation. And in that case, you can reach out to me or I will be reaching out to you. That will flag for me that I need to reach out to you to get those updated projections so we can continue to manage cash flow for these projects as a team. So I think what I'm trying to get across is that for payments for this project, we have to be in communication with each other. All of you all are grantees with us, the team, so that we can manage our requests from NRCS to have cash flow ready to pass on to you when you need it. And then it goes the other way as well, that we're not requesting cash that you don't need from NRCS, so that we can try to all be on the same page. So that's the next piece, the anticipated spending for the next quarter. So if you are not expecting changes to your cost projections, the anticipated spending in the next quarter should be the same as what's in your cost projections. If that is different, that will also flag to me that you probably need to make some adjustments to your cost projections. The last piece is for those of you that requested in your application to have NACD make direct payments to producers, you will indicate in this question whether or not, oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. This question, you will indicate whether or not you are expecting us to make direct payments to a producer in the next quarter, because that's another aspect. So there's a handful of our grantees that indicated in their application that they want NACD to make those direct payments. So if you are one of those grantees, please be aware of that first of all, so that you know that you'll be waiting for us to make those payments, but also then you'll have to answer this question to let us know if we should be expecting that in the next quarter. That is the most important piece I think that I wanted to go over, was the expenditures section. The rest is just if some supplemental information. All of this is optional. So does anyone have any questions at this time? I saw Chessa sent out the link to the report. I did send that. There's also a link in the email that I sent you to remind you to submit reports today. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free. You can ask, you can just take yourself off mute, or you can put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Chloe from Hamakua Soil and Water Conservation District. I was wondering how long producers should expect to receive a payment after the certification is complete.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I am going to go over that. I'm going to talk about payments next, I think. Or maybe I have a bullet point here to talk about payments. So I'll get to that payment question. But first, I just want to cover if there's anything specifically about this report. Okay. Please submit those today. They're due today. That would be really, really awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a second, and I will go back to our other updates. And if you think of any other questions, again, at any time, please feel free to chime in and ask your question.
Chloe, can I chime in for just a second?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make it really clear to all our grantees that we need your reports in order for us to aggregate the reports and submit them to our funder. So we need to get a report in to NRCS. Without the progress reports, we don't get paid. And if we don't get paid, unfortunately, you don't get paid. And so, as Chloe mentioned, these reports are due. And so please, if you haven't submitted them, it is required and really, really important for you to get them to us ASAP. It's not a long, tedious reporting process. And so even if you haven't started that yet, the form is pretty simple. And so you'll be able to get through that in a couple of minutes. So if you could just take that time, complete the report and send it to us so we can get it into NRCS so we can get funds without any hiccups. We would really, really, really appreciate that.
And thank you, Kanisha. So the next piece I wanted to touch on, I know that a lot of you might be waiting for our contract template. So part of the requirements of this grant is if you don't have an existing contract that you use for cost share for your district, then you will use the NACD contract template. So we are finalizing that right now and should have it to you. Kanisha, would you say by the end of the week?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. By the end of the week, we'll have a completed template to send to you. If you don't, if you're, and Chloe will clarify this, but if you're not, using an existing program where you have your own contract, then we will have this contract template to you by the end of the week that you can then use for your producers.
Yes, so I wanted to touch on that because I had received some questions about the contract template. So we have that coming shortly. But again, that's for you to use if you don't have a contract that you already use for cost share programs. So let's talk briefly about payments. So the way that the cash flow works for this program, we submit advance requests to NRCS and we base this on your cost projections that you gave to us. Once we receive those funds, then we will make payments to you based on the actual expenditures that you're reporting in your quarterly report. So that is important where if you're expecting changes to your cost projections, that will change the amount that we need to be requesting from NRCS, then you want to let me know. Again, the reports are a checkpoint. And when you tell us how much money that you need in the report, again, you can just have that be the same as what you put in your cost projections. You just want to be checking against the cost projections. Or you can let me know that you have a change to your cost projections. Once we receive those funds, those will go to you and we will let you know when payments go out. For those of you that are going to be paying producers yourself through your district and not using NACD's payment system to make payments to producers, you will receive your capacity building and financial assistance projections together. So you'll just receive that total that you projected for spending for that quarter for both of those pieces of your budget. If you are one of the grantees that had requested that NACD distribute payment to producers, then we will hang on to that financial assistance funding until we receive the certification that that practice was completed. And I will talk a little bit more later, as you can see, about the documentations that we will require from you. But particularly for those of you that are going to have NACD pay the producers, we will have to have an ACH form and a W-9 form for each producer. And we will have to have evidence of the certification of the practice from NRCS in order to make that payment. And so I want to make it clear that it is a high priority for us to not leave producers waiting for funding after they have already completed a practice. We do not want people to be waiting. There are factors that are somewhat out of our control, which is NRCS in terms of their schedule and them sending us the funding when we request in advance. However, we believe we're going to get kind of in a routine and a roll with this. And as soon as you know that you're going to need a payment, if this is going to change in your cost projections, just let us know as soon as you know, and we can incorporate that into our next advance request. I think the key here is just being in communication, again, with the team, letting us know if you expect changes to the cost projections, because that is where we'll be basing the cash flow off of. So that includes both the capacity building and the financial assistance. So if you are a grantee that is going to pay just to reiterate, if you're going to pay the producers directly, we're going to give you the funds, and then that'll be at your discretion to certify the practice before you pay them. If you are expecting us to pay the producers, then you will have to give us that information for us to pay them directly. I think we're just starting out. I think this first payment obviously has been slightly delayed, but this one might be the most confusing one because it's all new at the moment, but as we continue, I think we'll all get the hang of it and it'll be like smooth. That's my hope. So does anyone have any questions about the payment process and how we'll make those payments?
Chloe,
Hi,
I'll
Chloe.
just go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
Joy in South Carolina. Thank you. So I was just wondering, did I hear you correctly when you said when we get the certification from NRCS? Because we were actually planning on using technical service providers in the state and not NRCS.
So you are not augmenting an existing cost share program, correct?
Correct.
Right. So if you're not augmenting an existing cost share program, then you are required to follow NRCS practice standards.
Right.
I might let Chessa chime in on this one, but I believe we do require NRCS certification of the practice to make the payment.
We require certification of the practice, either NRCS sign off or someone with approved job approval authority or conservation planner status.
Okay. That was our understanding. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chessa.
Chloe, there's a question in the chat. Do you have a ballpark time frame on when they will send NACD funds?
Do you mean when we will send NACD funds to you, the grantee, or to the producers?
Sandra, feel free to get off mute and respond if you're comfortable.
Oh, yeah. So we've been kind of going through a little back and forth with NRCS, and I believe we're pretty much at the point that we will receive the advance any day. And so when we get it, we are going to send you funds, and it will be based on the projections that you've given us. So backdating for what you had previously said. So that's something else in your report. If you did not, when you're saying NACD funds expended, if you actually did not spend anything yet that was in your cost projections for the past quarter, just let me know because we need to switch that. But as of now, the payments will be made based on the cost projections for the quarters that passed. Are these taxable? Is this taxable income for producers? That I don't know. Chessa, do you know that?
Is cost share?
They'll receive a 1099, or they should receive a 1099. And then they'll have to talk to their tax advisor about if it's taxable income.
Okay, if they receive a 1099, they will have to pay taxes on it then.
Thank you.
Are we going to be receiving any retroactive funds from the last quarter?
Yeah, so that's what I was explaining for the payments. Once we get this advance is supposed to be covering, the advance is delayed, but the advance was requested for the quarters that have already passed. So it would be to pay you for the previous quarters based on your cost projections. So you can double check your cost projections for what you asked for the quarters prior to the one that just started in July. And that's what the payments will be based on.
Okay, great. Okay. And I'm sorry.
So let me know if that's
Lewis
changing.
from the Sarasota district.
Yes, thank you, Louis. Who will give them a 1099? Chessa, do you know?
I think if we're the ones sending the payments to the producer, the 1099 will come from us, from NACD, if we're paying the producers directly.
So if the district is paying the producers directly with NACD funds, then it will come from the district?
I would think so, but we could clarify that, but I would think so.
Okay. Okay, I have a question about the conservation practice plan, but I'm going to wait to address that just because I'm gonna wait until we get to that piece of the discussion just to um because I'm almost done anyway. So I guess for that's it for payments. What I wanted to say, the last piece before I get into that documentation requirement is just that we have um our FAQ document is live on the website, which does have more information that you might be looking for your questions on the program. So if anyone, well, I would recommend everyone take a look at it when you have time, just to see if there's any questions that you are looking for answers that already exist there. But it's, it's not comprehensive, and we'll continue to add to it. It's as comprehensive as it can be at the moment. And then as you ask us more questions, we'll add more. So it's a living document, but it's currently on the website. So there's the link to the FAQ. I just wanted to share that with everyone. And then, yeah, so let's talk about the documentation requirements. And you'll notice that I do defer to Chessa a lot when it comes to NRCS program questions, because she's kind of the expert here on our team. So the documents that will be required as part of your reporting on this project, the conservation practice plan. So Chessa, there was a question that said, did they just need to show the fences, or is this a full plan for the entire property?
In an ideal world, it would be the full plan, but for this program, I think we're only requiring where you're going to be installing the fence. I don't know if there's a requirement. I think the CPA 052 is still going to be required, but you don't have to submit that to us.
Yeah, so this is the documentation requirements to submit to us. Obviously, there's more documentation that may be required for this process. And assuming that the practice is certified, then you would have done all the required documentation. But we wanted to make it clear the documentation that NACD will ask for as part of your reporting to NACD. So also, Kenesha just shared the link for the FAQ, or the homepage of the program where you can find the FAQ.
Chloe, can I chime in for just a
Yeah.
moment, if that's
Go for it.
okay? I know some of you do have specific questions that might be related to your state. So it might be state level, local level requirement questions that you have. We are working with the state conservationist. At least we're just now about to try to schedule meetings with your state con and all the grantees in that particular state. So for example, if we have multiple grantees in I'm just going to say Georgia, we'll get all those grantees together with the state conservationist and anyone at that local level who could be on the call to answer some of those questions that you have that would be specific to your state or to your local laws and requirements. So I know some of these we might not be able to answer at NACD, but we're working to get you together with the appropriate people at the local level to be able to answer those. So stay tuned on that. We'll be getting an email from us with some potential dates to schedule again by state. So please don't freak out if we're not answering some of those technical questions at this level. But we will work to get you partnered with the local NRCS to answer some of those questions for you. And in the meantime, please do feel free to reach out to your local NRCS office to ask those questions. So you don't have to wait for us to schedule those meetings. Go ahead and reach out to your local office and ask some of those technical questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. So as I had mentioned, we'll also need the certification from NRCS or an authority that is able to sign off on that. Then we'll also need a copy of the signed producer contracts just to verify that since they are supposed to be three-party agreements, to verify that those are executed. We will need to see the operations and maintenance plans. if NACD is paying producers directly. So again, this only applies if you have requested for NACD to pay the producers directly. We will need an ACH form and a W-9 form for each producer. So you all should have submitted me, I believe most of you have already submitted me your ACH and W-9 for your district to receive payment. We'll need those same forms for each producer in order for our finance department to pay them. Another aspect of this is if you are working with a historically underserved producer, they can complete the self-certification form. And this is the only way that we can offer an advance payment for a practice. So something I probably should have noted about payments, these will always be be on a reimbursement basis because we have to have the practice certified before we can pay for it. If the producer is a historically underserved producer and they are willing to self-certify through that form, there is the option to receive an advance payment, and I believe that's up to 50% of the practice that they can receive an advance for. So that is something that if you're paying producers directly, you'll be responsible again for tracking that. You'll have to submit the self-certification to us, but you'll be responsible for determining how you're distributing those funds in terms of advance or reimbursement. If you are requesting NACD pay the producer directly, then we'll still have to see that form, and then we can work with you on getting the payments advanced if that's needed. So those are the documents that we will require, NACD will require for this program for paying producers. So I think that kind of covers what I wanted to talk about today.
We have some questions in the chat, Chloe.
Okay, yeah, let me go through. So if one of the grant administrators on the state or district staff has JAA through NRCS, can they sign off on practice certification? Chessa.
Yes. If you have
Yes.
appropriate job approval authority for the conservation practice for the fencing standard, they can sign off on that.
Awesome. If districts are paying the producer, would you suggest the district to get the W-9 from producers? That is,
Yes.
yeah, yes. Yes, you'll want to do that. So that would be on in your financial tracking system that you would collect that information on the producers that you're paying. Is the project deadline 24 months after the MOA is signed, or is it December 2025? Thank you. That was the other point that I meant to address. As of right now, it is the December 2025 is when our agreement with NRCS ends. So I would plan, sorry, go ahead, Kanisha.
No, I was just confirming what Chloe said about the December 2025. That's when our agreement ends. We will work with NRCS to try to get an extension, but we always say don't bank on that extension because that is decided by NRCS. So for now, we'll have to work with the December 2025 date. But as quickly as we know, if we're going to get an extension, which we are hoping and maybe a little bit positive about, maybe optimistic, I'm not quite sure, then we'll let you know. But for now, just work with that December 2025 date in mind.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. Operate based on the December 2025 date, and as soon as I know any updates on an extension, y'all will be the first to hear about it. Is there a chance more funds will become available to do this again? Maybe that would be fun. I would like that. I mean, I don't know right now. Obviously we will let you know if an opportunity arises. And I can't make any promises at this time, but we'll see how the program goes, and That'll be up to NRCS.
Quick question,
Go ahead, Luis.
on that advance payment for the HUs, now, can that exceed 50% from our district since we're gonna be directly dispersing, or should we stay within your guidelines, not advance more than 50%?
It's an NRCS guideline.
Okay,
So I believe, Chessa, I'll ask you to confirm, but I believe we cannot exceed the 50%. It's not our rule, it's the NRCS rule.
and that's fine. I just needed clarity on that. Perfect. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? We still have a little time.
I guess I have one. This is Joy again in South Carolina. The historically underserved self-certification form, is that as it sounds? Like they fill out the form and we have to trust the information they provide? They do not have to register through another entity or through FSA as a veteran or anything else?
Joy, that form is filed with FSA office.
It
It's
is.
the
Okay.
local FSA office. But yes, it is what it sounds. They are self-certifying, as in checking off the box which of those 4 categories they fall in. That would then then they would be considered historical and underserved by any one or more of those selections. But it has to be filed with their local FSA office.
Very good. Thank you.
I have another question. Is there a possibility to redistribute funding if some grantees don't spend all their funds? Similar to how NRCS sweeps funds sometimes. Do you mean that if you don't spend your funds that we would distribute it to a different grantee? Sorry, Kenesha, it looks like you thought you had an answer potentially.
I'm not quite sure we have discussed this internally. That is kind of how we operate with some of our other programs. And if we do that, it just requires rescoping with any new, funding that goes to any grantees, then we'll have to revise scope and amend the agreement. But this is one we haven't discussed internally. I would hate to give the money back. So potentially, if that's allowed by the funder, we would certainly do that. So for grantees who could use that additional funds, yeah, we'll have to think about one if we can, but if we can, what would that look like? I could imagine a lot of grantees on here could use some extra funding to do some more work on this program. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead. And then I'll do the next question in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that one.
That's okay.
On the wetland determination, I had talked to my DC about that, and it said the FSA would not be tending to that the NRCS field office staff would, but they do not do that. They have not done that in history of anybody that's in my field office. So what do we do about that?
For your 1026, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. And as far as there was some documentation to prove that the determination was done.
If I'm not mistaken, Chessa, isn't this filed with the FSA office?
Correct.
And
The
maybe that's why
1026
you're
is done on the FSA side.
Yeah, and maybe that's why your local NRCS office is saying we haven't done this, because it's filed with the FSA office.
Okay, so their determination should already be done though, right? If they have a form and track number?
Possibly.
Possibly, but they can always check. They can always call the local office or visit the local office and see what's on file. And some, depending, would have to maybe update. So it's not a bad idea to just have them check on that, Tonda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will address the next question in the chat, which is going to be for Chessa. In the FAQ, it says that a conservation plan isn't required, but an operations plan may be. What's the difference between a conservation practice plan, and an operations plan?
We are not requiring the full 9-step conservation plan as defined by NRCS for this. We're just looking for you to submit the plan for the practice. So where the fencing is actually going to be installed and all the supporting documents for getting certification of the practice being installed. And then the operations plan is the operation and maintenance for the life expectancy for the full 20 years of the fence, or whatever your state has defined as the life expectancy for fencing, how that's going to be maintained and what you'll do as the producer to maintain that.
Thank you. And then the next question was, I believe was, what were we saying about 50%? I missed that. I believe that was, we were just talking about the maximum advance for a historically underserved producer. So all the producers will be operating on reimbursement unless they are historically underserved producer, in which case they'd be eligible for a 50% advance on the practice payment. I think that's what that question is referring to. The next question was, do we have AGI limitations? I believe no.
No,
Let me just check.
no, there are no AGI limitations for this program.
Okay.
That's in the FAQ. If you go through it, you'll see, but no, this is not required. There's no limitations for this book.
Okay,
AGI,
great.
AGI
AGI.
limitations.
Yeah, there's no AGI limitations.
It's just that
Yeah.
there are no limitations. AGI limitations. There are no AGI limitations.
So that's the last question I have in the chat as of now. Does anyone else want to chime in with any questions?
But yes, Miss Chloe, this is Levi here with Blackwater Stormwater Conservation District in Florida. I had a question about payments from earlier. You did mention that we're going to be funneling the money through the district to the actual participant. I was needed a little clarity through who we're funneling it through because we're using Three Rivers RC and D. The capacity building monies plus the cost share money to the participant is going to be one payment sent together to us. Is that correct? Or will it be two payments, one for capacity building and then the second for cost share?
Yeah, so if your organization is going to be responsible for distributing the cost share payments, it's going to come all together as one payment. So it'll be your responsibility to keep track of how much of that you're spending on capacity building versus financial assistance, and keeping that consistent with the budget that you presented to us. If there's changes where you say, oh, it turns out we're actually going to put more money into financial assistance and less money from capacity building than what you had originally proposed in the budget, just let us know and we can review any kind of budget changes that you have. But again, in your cost projections, you broke out the projections per quarter based on capacity building and financial assistance. And so for each quarter, there's a total. But it should also be broken out. So when you receive that payment, you can look back at the cost projection and see what portion is supposed to be for which category when you're trying to determine what's going where. I know that that might not be an exact science, but you should be tracking internally, like your financial tracking should be keeping track of where the NACD funds are going. So whether they're going to those producer payments or financial assistance, we expect you to be tracking that against your budget.
Perfect, thank you. And then the second question I had, it actually just popped up in the chat, was the payment rate. We have a cost estimator for the state of Florida through NRCS. Is that the payment rate that we will be utilizing for our specific area? Would be through Florida NRCS, seeing how that's in our state?
It's equip payment rates.
Exactly, through the cost estimator for
Yes.
our area. Okay, because I know that every region has a different cost estimate based on the region that they're in. Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's right. Right, Treza?
You'll use your approved NRCS payment rate.
And then the question was, we will honor the historically underserved rate. Correct, we will, but they have to self-certify. We need that form.
I think there was a question on the HEL determination.
Oh, yeah. Do they have to file HEL determinations with FSA?
That's so
Justin?
1026. So if we're requiring the 1026 build for wetland determinations, it'll be the same for the HEL. We might just need to clarify that for our,
Confirm, yeah.
yeah.
We'll confirm the HEL requirements and put that in a blast email to everyone. But if it is required, then yes, through FSA.
Just writing that down so I make sure we follow up. So we will all use the established NRCS rate in our state. Yes. Correct.
Unless you have some program you're already, which I would imagine it would still follow the NRCS rate, right?
Yeah, I believe we have one grantee that's augmenting an existing cost share program in their state, and they know who they are, and they can talk to me about it. But if, otherwise, yes, we're utilizing that. So I just know that we only had one grantee augmenting an existing program. So for everybody else that is utilizing the NRCS, they'll be utilizing the NRCS rates.
I had a question. I'm Kaylee Jarvis from Texas. For the NRCS rates, if they sign the contract in fiscal year 2024, are they locked into that rate? Even if they complete it in 2025, is it kind of when they certify or when they sign the contract?
Good question.
My guess, and we'll confirm, but my guess is when it's certified. So the contract is just so we can get, like, we're all on the same page. We can then require all the documentation from the producers and get that process in place. So we have that agreement. But my guess would be because it's based on reimbursement, it's going to be based on whatever cost those expenses in, let's say, 2025 versus when they signed the contract, but we can confirm. But my guess would be whatever year the practice is implemented, but we'll confirm.
Thank you.
Awesome. We have a lot of good questions. Thank you. Looks like we got another one. So I might have to ask this one-on-one, but for our agreement, we wouldn't be able to meet the number of producers served and the linear feet requirement if we use NRCS rates. Yes, that is something you should reach out to us about, potentially changing the scope in your agreement.
Now, Chloe, I don't see another question, so I just want to chime in a little bit before we hop off, even if it's something for the grantees to think about and then reach out to us, or we will reach out to you. I don't know. We can work on that, but we would love to hear from the grantees where you are in the process, and some of this will once you submit your reports, hopefully that's clear. Maybe you're just in the process of doing outreach to producers. Maybe you are doing enrollment with producers, but we want to get a sense of where you are in the process so we can anticipate kind of the needs of payments for the producer incentives. So we don't want to, for our own internal guidance that we have from NRCS and what we have to follow, we don't want, or we can't request funding way in advance and hold for producers if we don't anticipate any implementation of the practice within the next quarter or the quarter after. So it would be really great if you could send us an email to Chloe, just as here's where we are in the process and kind of when you anticipate the practice will be implemented. So we're ready with those advanced, but also so we're not requesting those ahead of time because we just cannot do that with NRCS. So just wanted to throw that out there. So we might be reaching out to you, or if you feel so led, if you could send us an email with that brief information, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, that's thank you. And that goes back to my comments earlier about how this is going to be a collaborative process between you all and our team to know understanding what your needs are and keeping us updated at where it as to where you're at in the process. And yeah, hopefully your reports will shed more light on that, but reaching out and letting us know would be extremely helpful. I got another question. Will NRCS provide the payment rate when they approve a fencing design? There is no approved fence design for this yet in South Carolina. That might be a question for Chessa. I'm sorry, Chessa, but I'm glad you're here.
I'm just looking. There is an approved practice standard for South Carolina for fencing, but I haven't dug too far into it. So we'll have to get back to you on the payment rates.
Miss Chloe, this is Levi here from Blackwater Stormwater Conservation District. I might have a workaround there for Joy Sullivan in South Carolina. One thing that NRCS allows us to do is create a variance, which is approved by the state resource conservationist, which we had to do here in Florida. We had a fence design. It was not going to meet for several factors. One was mentioned earlier that we couldn't meet the fence within our MOA. So we had our area resource conservationist meet with us in the office. We developed a variance. We submitted it to the state resource conservationist. He then met with the state conservationist and they approved the variance for hog fencing just for Blackwater Stormwater Conservation District in our area. So that'd be a route to try.
Well, good. Thanks for sharing that, Levi.
That's actually what we're looking at. We haven't gotten that far yet, but that's where I wondered. They will determine what that payment rate will be for the variance, I guess is what you would call it.
Well, with our example, the payment rate did not change.
It didn't. Okay.
No, the payment did not change, but what we did is we met with our FWC biologist and we determined that a hot wire or energized wire would be more beneficial and it would provide more feet for the cost share. So we had a variance created to meet a hot wire design that would exclude hogs.
We're on the same plane. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have any last questions before we wrap up today? And of course, you can always reach out at any time with your questions. I just thought it'd be helpful to get everybody together and just have a little initial meeting discussion to cover some of these important topics, but we can always have calls. Can you reiterate the cost share rate? It's NRCS equip rates for your state. Good. Well,